Hello, I'm Rita Ferrandino, and I've dedicated my life to bringing next generation innovation solutions to education. I've worked in innovation and education in K-12, higher ed, and workforce development. And today, as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention, I wanted to hear from education evangelists as to why they think and what the critical issues are in education for this election cycle and why people need to vote. So I've invited my friend and colleague, Jamie Casap, who served as Google's chief education evangelist for over 14 years, to share his perspective. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, that makes me feel old when you say 14 years.
Well, Jamie, you have been outspoken as to why you care about equity in education and why people need to vote because of it. Can you explain why you're so passionate about getting people, in particular young people, to vote this election?
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been interested in for a very long time. I mean, at the end of the day, I usually do a lot of keynotes and presentations, and I always start with this concept that we all got to remember in education, which is that education is what disrupts poverty, right? That this idea that when we give great education, we all benefit from it. And for me, it's personal, right? I'm a first generation American. I was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York, the old school Hell's Kitchen, New York, which apparently is coming back again. But that old Hell's Kitchen, New York, I grew up with a single mother. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. And what got me to this point where I can talk to you and I can work at Google for 14 years is my education. That's what started. That was the catalyst. And so I always wonder, because in my position, I don't get to meet a lot of people who have a similar position or similar influence that have my background. And so the number one problem I find is that because we're not focused on equity, we're missing out. We're missing out on talented people. We're missing out on talented ideas. We don't even know, the cure for cancer is probably something that we might have missed along the way. There's so much out there. And so equity has to be about providing a surge of support for students, especially students that are growing up the way I grew up, with the support and resources and services that they need so that they can thrive. Because just because you were born with a certain zip code doesn't mean that you should be ever in a poor community because that's where you were born. That shouldn't count. Everyone has an opportunity, and I think education gives us that opportunity. And so when it comes to young people, what I'm seeing today is young people out there, they're protesting, they're engaged, they care about issues. And I know a lot of them care about education. And so what we're trying to do, and what I wanted to talk to you about, is this idea that equity in education and election cycles go hand in hand, right? Like, those things are partners. You can't get to one without the other. And I know a lot of young people are interested in presidential elections. I got a 19-year-old who's camping out, waiting so that he can vote for the first time in his life. But more importantly, I want him to vote every November. I want him to vote for the school board. I want him to know who the candidates are and what they stand for. I want him to know who the state representative is and what the election cycle is. And I want him to vote on propositions. Like, I want him fully engaged, not just during the election cycle. So my expectation is more than just getting young people out to vote. I want them engaged in the whole civic process.
Well, that is a tremendous and noble effort. So, Jamie, what do we need to do in education so our students are prepared for their future?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I don't think that I don't like to talk about how education is broken. That doesn't make sense to me. Education is not broken. Education is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It does it really well. It was designed at a time when the economy was different. The world has dramatically changed since 1995. And what we need to do in education, all of us who are leaders in education, we have to ask ourselves, what's the right model that we need for the future that we face? And what we face is a digitalized economy like no other time before. digitalization, computer science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, AR, VR, automation, robotics, that whole thing is the future. And we are at the very, 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 very beginning of that, right? So Google just had a breakthrough a couple of months ago when it comes to quantum computing. And I'm not going to get into defining quantum computing, but I will say this. The breakthrough, if you take one of those crazy mathematical formulas that just keep spinning for years, if you feed that to a supercomputer, the world's most powerful supercomputer, it would take that supercomputer 10,000 years to process the equation. The breakthrough that Google had with quantum computing is that they figured out how to do the same calculation in 300 seconds. 10,000 years versus 300 seconds. That's where we are right now, in between those two worlds. And so preparing our students for that digitalized world and making sure that they have the human skills like problem solving and collaboration and communication and those types of things that they're going to need so that machines and digitalization and humans work together, just like you and I are using machines and technology and digitalization so that we can have a human connection. That connection has to happen across education, and we have to help our students prepare that way for that future. And so equity becomes even more important in that kind of scenario, because all the evidence shows us that there are rich school districts that are doing enriching education for their students, and poor school districts cannot do it. And so we need equity in education to at least level the playing field so that our students that are growing up the way I grew up have the access that they need and the support they need so that they can also prepare for that digitalized future, because it's coming for everyone.
Well, I thank you for that. One final statement. I'd
Sure.
like one final. As an education advocate and evangelist, why should young people pay attention and vote?
Yeah, and you know that's the $1 million question. And I think that I'm expecting a huge change. I got high expectations for this generation. This is the problem-solving generation. This is the generation that is taking it all on and saying, you know what, you guys, you old farts, you didn't solve the problem. We're gonna solve it. And I trust that. I think that's what's gonna happen with this generation, like my 19-year-old. And so what they need to understand is that it's not, like I said earlier, it's not just about voting in presidential elections. They need to understand the whole process. They need to understand how education works. And education works through elections of school board members, and it works by selecting superintendents. And nobody ever knows that there are council meetings that determine who the superintendent of your school district is. And so all that stuff, all that engagement, all that understanding of how the process works and being engaged and showing up to vote and showing up to give your opinion and showing up to council meetings and showing up to school board meetings, and all that stuff is how you get engaged. And that's where the power comes from, because if more people do that, then they have to react to you. They have to abide by what you want them to do. So I'm hoping that young people see that and they realize that they have the power to bring the change that they're out protesting about. And I'm excited by that opportunity.
And on that note, I thank you for sharing your perspective with us today. We look forward to following you and watching where the next adventures take you. Thank you, Jamie, and let's change education together. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for